Being recorded. Dr. Mountain, you may start the meeting when you'd like.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Vicki. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 1:01 p.m. on August 5th, 2021. Could the members of the board introduce themselves?
John Deerking is present.
Thank you. Moderator, is there anyone else here from the board? I'm not seeing my list.
The only other person here is Cheryl Turner. I will unmute her microphone now. Ms. Turner?
Yes, this is Cheryl Turner. I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe that I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Yamaguchi for her operations report.
Thank you very much. This is going to be a very abbreviated operations report, mostly to reflect the fact that we are, of course, still trying to transition back to the office, our staff operations, and we do still have some degree of teleworking going on, but we've had to be very careful about the kind of work we can have teleworking. We have to make certain that no personal information can be out of the office in a paper form or electronic form. So right now we're working on that. I think everybody knows that the governor has issued a directive to the state agencies to provide mandatory vaccination verification and or testing. Right now the operation of that hasn't really been nailed down, but I know that DCA has set up a means for us to send in our own verification of our vaccination status, either through a portal or through a Microsoft Teams meeting. Right now, I think we're waiting for other directives to come, either through the governor himself's office or as DCA is working to operationalize the new directives. It's a little dismaying. We were all really starting to like the idea of starting to normalize, but this whole new variant is serious, and it's a few steps backward in a lot of our areas. So we'll be staying very, very much vigilant, let's just say, on this scale. Aside from that, all is well in the operations. Madam Chair?
Thank you for that update and just explaining where you guys are at with the variant. I appreciate that. I believe that we're ready to move on to the Enforcement Division report. Ms. Wood?
Actually, that'll be Mr. Crowdy.
Oh.
Yes, this is Jay. I'll be filling in for Antoinette today. I believe, Carol, you and John received copies of our enforcement report from July 2021. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm able to take any questions at this time if you had any.
I do not have any, Mr. Durkin.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Education Division report, Ms. Cordero.
Ms. Cordero is actually out today, and I unfortunately don't really know what she was planning to report on. But I do know, of course, that we've been making a lot of progress in terms of doing a lot of stakeholder outreach with regard to how we want to move ahead in terms of initial program approval. We do have our town hall coming up on the 12th. I think the committee will recall that we had planned to do this town hall, but in preparation for that, we made that initial draft rubric and application packet available online, and we sent it out to quite a number of people and asked for comments. We did receive a few, not a vast number of comments by any means, but the ones we got were very thoughtful, we thought, and very, very not, well, actually very positive, actually, in a lot of ways. People are very pleased that the board is moving ahead in trying to create a much more transparent and a much more activist kind of approach to program approval. So I think even though, and we'll get to this under legend regs, so even though I don't know that we're going to be able to move ahead on that project next year, I think we are going to make a lot of strides, and the discussion itself has been very, very worthwhile. Madam Chair?
Thank you. And I agree with the discussion. I think this has been a really good thing to open up. So I know a lot of people are looking at it. I got an email about it just yesterday. So,
Oh, great.
yeah. All right. I believe we're ready to go on to licensing division report. Ms. Brown?
Hi. Yes. This is Shelley. I'm here with the licensing division report. We recently hired 2 new licensing technicians. One started a couple weeks ago. Another one is starting on August 16th. So we will be, our licensing techs will be fully staffed at that point. We did lose one of our licensing supervisors. She accepted a promotion to another agency. So Ivan and I will be conducting interviews tomorrow for a new licensing supervisor. We have 5 candidates, 4 of which are internal. And then we did lose one of our equivalency analysts, Demi Verdiales. She had been here for quite a while. She accepted a position at CalSTRS. They have a satellite office in Fresno, and that's where she's from. We were happy for her. So we have posted that position, and we will hopefully be conducting interviews by the end of the month. All the licensing staff are working in the office. They've been back since June. Everything's been going great. It's nice to have everyone back. It makes training and projects much easier. Processing times have been really good. Our phones have been great. Our wait times are less than a minute. A lot of times there's no wait at all when you call us. And in July, we had a 97% assist rate, which is outstanding. So that's all I have.
Congratulations on your 97%. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. I believe it's time to move on to the budget and fiscal report, and that would be Ms. Yamaguchi.
So this is a little bit convoluted, I think I might say. Our team met with the DCA budget and fiscals team a few weeks ago, and we went through the existing fund condition and as well as our budget report and the assumptions made by the new governor's budget, which took effect July 1. So we talked a good amount about some of the assumptions going in, and what we found, of course, is that not all of the assumptions for future were part of our projections, and so the principal one, of course, being the augmentation we would need for the attorney generals. Now, this is, of course, a mixed bag, and not to get too far in the weeds here, mostly because Miss Lyman's not here to kick me to tell me to be quiet. But because the board will remember that we had this huge backlog, going back years, and then through the really, really hard work of the enforcement staff in 18 and 19, we had a vast number of cases going forward to the Division of Investigations and to the Office of the Attorney General. So what we're seeing here is, I think, this cresting wave, and coincidentally, this is part of the fee we pay to both the department as well as to the Attorney Generals. So we're seeing, I think, the crest of that wave to address that huge amount of work that went in 18 and 19. And because I think lately, and Jay can probably correct me, this year and last year, we've seen a big drop in complaints, and so the staff has been able to work on, coming current with pretty much everything, which is amazing. And I did want to make one small note that the folks in enforcement have gotten so much work done, over the past year, that it's really amazing. So on the one hand, we're seeing, I think, the beginnings of this decline in casework, which, technically down the road next year after, should mean that we would be paying less in to the Attorney General and to the Division of Investigations. But they're funded on this this kind of 2-year forward model, which means that right now we're kind of paying the bills for the large amount of casework in 18 and 19. But the caveat here, and Jay might be able to comment on this as well, is that we have this suspicion that over last year and this year, a lot of complaints and a lot of actions didn't get filed because, frankly, healthcare organizations had a lot more to worry about than, any amount of the smaller cases. They, of course, would move forward with larger problems, but the smaller things they might not have filed on. And so those might be waiting on someone's desk, or they might just have been dealt with internally or just canceled. But on the other hand, because we are seeing, and have seen over the past few months, this kind of up and down thing of the state reopening, the state not reopening, we can't by any means underplay the seriousness of the mental health condition of our licensees. So I don't say that this is going to be a certain thing, but I would not be a bit surprised to see a rise in cases coming forward with DUI, other substance abuses. So I feel like we're waiting for that other shoe to drop in a lot of ways. And so while I think that the first wave is starting to come down, I think there might be another rise coming probably, by the end of this year, and the beginning of next, just to catch up. But I would be very, very happy to be proven wrong on that. Now, the rest of the budget and fiscal issues we're seeing, of course, and we've made this very plain, of course, is that, we've said since the very, very beginning that this board has a structural imbalance, that our revenue streams are not equal to what we believe the expense projections are going to be. We've been fortunate to have cash reserves that have carried us over the past couple of years, but that can't be sustained for very much longer. When we met with budget and fiscal, we found that date of insolvency, and I think you'll recall that we've talked about it being as early as 22, as late as 24, maybe 25. But we feel like the sounder numbers that we've been working with recently place us becoming insolvent pretty close to early 2023. At this point, that's soon. That's not a great thing, but it also gives us, I think, a little bit better of the ability to plan. So right now, as you know, we have, of course, been seeking authorization to assess the schools and programs fees for services, but we also must be cognizant of the other unfortunate revenue source, and I believe we've talked about this a bit too, that we do, of course, have rulemaking action in the works to increase applicant licensee fees and continuing to provider fees, as well as a few other small items. Now, the nature of that process, of course, is that it moves slowly, which is why even if I thought all of our fiscal woes were going to be fixed in this coming year, we would still probably want to make certain that we were proceeding with that rulemaking package, because we always, of course, have the ability to roll back a fee increase or decrease a fee. So that being said, I would pause here for questions.
I have no questions.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I see no hands raised in the public as well.
Splendid.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that report. Moving on, we will go to the update and possible action on sunset legislation. Ms. Yamaguchi.
I actually do have updates here. After a lot of discussion with the Assembly and Senate staff over the past few weeks, the legislature has drafted some amendments to move forward into our sunset bill. That's AB 1536. I think the discussion and action items on the agenda aren't actually relevant to the update here, but I'll break that up a little bit here. So in terms of the proposed pilot program concept and proposed possible draft legislative language, we don't seem to have the legislative support right now in terms of putting anything with regard to this pilot program into our sunset bill. What we did achieve, I think, is a very solid acknowledgement from the legislature that our program application process needs some teeth, to put it bluntly. We needed to better define the timelines, and frankly, we needed to, I think, change the order in which we do this work. I think currently, I don't know how detailed we've been in the past, but generally up till now, what's happened is that a program, if they want to propose a new school or a new program, they have filed a very rudimentary letter of intent, and this board staff has said, thank you, we've received this, and your number 45 on the list, and generally speaking, that has taken X amount of time to get to the point where you would be assigned to an AC. So the problem with that, of course, has been that, one, people have been waiting way too long, and two, they aren't asked to or held responsible for actually starting the process before they're assigned to an NEC. One thing that we think is very important is we changed that. We absolutely reversed that, so that, and this is where we do have, I think, some fairly solid and very hopeful language in our sunset bill coming forward. And that would be that upon notification, when we receive this letter of intent, we provide the programs with that very comprehensive list of what they must prepare for approval and a time frame. And not to put too fine a point on it, they would be assessed a fee. So we think that going forward, given that advanced knowledge and given that awareness that in about 6 months, in about 10 months, you need to be able to produce your curriculum, your policies, your handbook, all these things, and you will owe a filing fee, in essence, of $5,000. Now, we think, though, that, and I think you'll recall from our sunset hearing, that a great deal of concern was expressed about our waiting list, which is way too large, very unsustainably large. Right now, I believe it's at 52, and that's after the NECs picked up about 18 programs off the list since March. So what we've seen here, and this, by the way, is where I would like to say how really marvelously Marie and the Education Division staff have been working. They've been looking at every single piece of information and is it correct? Is it according to code and regs? Is it necessary? Is that the right sequence? I wanted to call out, of course, Carolyn and Vicky Saavedra, who did a vast amount of information gathering on our existing programs in terms of the size of these programs, the amount of fees they charge, and other really critical information. So based on a lot of information gathering, so we've used that. We've used the waiting list. We've used the NEC's workload work study, if you will. We've been really, I think, able to provide a much clearer picture of what goes into a program approval process and what it actually should cost. A very, very fluffy number here is we calculate that the Education Division is about 12% of our annual expenses, and that comes in at roughly, I would say, $2.6 million. Now, the fee structure we had proposed initially, that the board had discussed and approved, that brought in the beginnings. The beginning of it would have brought in somewhere in the $1.2 million per year picture. The structure that the legislature has in mind for us this year is not even close to that. And I'll get to that in a sec. But actually, no, let me pause here because I wanted to focus on just the program approval process part. And so let me pause there for any questions.
I have no questions.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Hi, Elaine. This is the moderator. Mr. Kobe Pizzotti, he doesn't have a hand raised, but he does have a question mark that indicates he has a question. So I will unmute his microphone.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Again, this is Kobe Pizzotti. I didn't necessarily want to comment yet. I was going to wait for Ms. Yamaguchi to finish her report. I've been working with the B&P committee for both houses in drafting some of these amendments and getting them ready. But the only question that I had was more based on your budget. Ms. Yamaguchi, you said that your insolvency wouldn't be until maybe early 23. That's that's close to 16, 17 months away. I'm wondering, what is your typical reserve balance in terms of months?
Well, that is a great question. A typical reserve balance for BVNPT per se, I can't tell you because we have not had anything of a typical balance, because when I started, I think there was probably about 4 or 5 months in reserve, and we've unfortunately reduced to that, let's just say. What I think a lot of generally accepted prudent reserve is usually cited at about 4 to 6 months in reserve. So if you figure that, our annual budget is something like 19 million, so, a 1/12 of that times, let's say 3 for just, beginning. But of course, obviously a reserve can't just be assumed initially. So, I would think that we would have to win a lottery, a very big lottery, to actually go from our dwindling reserve to what we think would be a healthy reserve. automatically. What we're much more likely to see is a gradual move upward. So first we would be balancing that, our revenue would be covering our expenses. And of course, and by the way, I want it very clear that we have been very, very frugal. We've made any number over the past 3 years of efficiencies. We've found a lot of places where previous management has really had made some, I would think, some questionable decisions. And we're fairly mean now. We've actually also taken a really long look at the staffing, and while we're committed to making sure that we have the staffing person power to do all the licensing, the education, and the enforcement functions that we need to do, and because we know that what happens when you start undercutting staff or not filling positions. But we've also been really careful, I think, and questioning about, are those the appropriate staffing levels? I mean, or do we have the right classification of employees doing the right classification of tasks? So I think, like I said, I just want it said for the public that we're trying very hard to be efficient and frugal, as well. But back to you, I think your actual question here is, we would start, I think, by trying to find that balance point, right, of what our revenue should be and what our expenses are supposed to be, and what kind of revenue we need to achieve that. And then I think, given that, being able to build ever so slightly, so that basically we would need to project a revenue figure that's slightly above, the expenses, right? That's just regular bookkeeping. That's just regular, cash management.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And that's a great point. I can say in the 10 years that I've been following the board, I've really rarely seen a reserve that is this flush as it is right now. And as I sit on the school board in my town, and we hold a pretty prudent reserve of about 6% of operation capital. So, and I think 3% is what Ed Code requires for for school districts. I don't know what boards and commissions use as a reserve balance generally in trying to budget, but we try to maintain 6%, just on the natural. Thank you for that, and I appreciate your answer. And I will get to the amendments that the BMP comes after you continue your report.
Okay. Great. So, would anybody else have a question about the program approval process part? Okay, well, let me just summarize, though, with the actual legislation. Well, right now, the proposed amendments that we've been provided, the bill itself is not in print just yet. We expect it pretty much today, tomorrow, the next day. But the amendments that have been proposed provide us with a very, very tight deadline that we think is very ambitious, in terms of within X number of days, we provide the program with this information. And then the program has X number of days to respond to the VNPT, to the NEC. That coupled with the upending, I think, of requiring the information up front rather than waiting until it's assigned to an NEC and then starting from scratch. I think, if I were really to make a guesstimate, I think, if all things considered, if this model takes effect, I think from start to finish, from letter of intent to approval to admit the first class, it should take something like 18 to 24 months. I think it could be a lot higher, and I think it could be a lot lower. And so I think that, so even though the legislature is not willing right now to move into the idea of a competitive process that we've been discussing, and we're still very interested in pursuing, I think the language that the legislature is looking at providing us this year gives us a bit of time, I think, to plan and to work with all stakeholders as well as the legislature to really, I think, build a very solid, permanent program, a process. So I don't really have any recommendations for actual action on actually on the bill itself as a whole, and not on this, but I did want the executive committee to know where we seem to be going. So let me move then into the proposed school fees aspect. And again, you'll recall that we had developed, I think, the beginnings of a very robust fee structure for the schools, broken out into the initial application and approval process, continued approval, and then a provisional approval. Separate fee structure for each of those three phases. And our really rough numbers showed that bring in possibly initially as much as 1.2 to 1.5 million a year, but it was also kind of developed to the point of we were basically we were thinking that this would be a building scenario, so that we were naturally increasing the number of schools, which is naturally increasing the number of students, which is naturally increasing the number of licensees. And so building, that whole infrastructure really for vocational nursing and psychiatric technicians. It's obviously, this is something that, you can't look at in a year-to-year thing. This is like 3 to 5 years in the making, so that while we would be, kind of scratching to move up, it would be building over the coming years. So the legislature, again, looked at our proposed language and looked at certainly the NEC's work study and agreed. The unreimbursed workload is not a good thing for this board, and some fee structure was essential. And this is of course a concept that we've been, I think, having that conversation all over the community since, well, certainly since I took office, but I know that it actually started before I took office. What I think we're looking at this point in the drafted amendments is slightly, well, actually significantly lower than what we had projected. What they're looking to institute for us, or for us to institute rather, is for initial program approval, a $5,000 filing fee with a $15,000 final approval fee. And then rather than the prorated continuing approval fee that we kind of roughed together, they would have recommended that instead there be a set annual continuing approval fee. And by the way, the whole of the phraseology of what continued approval and what does this fee actually mean? What can we actually call it to make sure it's correctly expressed? So what the legislature right now has suggested is that we have an annual $5,000 fee across the board, and it would take effect immediately. So on the one hand, the fee structure we had developed ranged from $7,500 over the 4-year period for the very small programs, and up to as much as $30,000 for the very large programs over that 4-year period. It kind of balances. It kind of does not. But I think initially, it certainly helps to improve our revenue stream, and again, gives us that time to work on a more permanent structure. And so even though we continue to think that this is an essential point for the board to resolve, it continues to be a work in progress. So let me pause there for some questions and comments.
So does that mean that the $5,000 fee is going to go through, and that would be a yearly thing for every single program?
Yes, it does.
And how will that affect the original structure that you were proposing? Is that just going to be gone?
Yes. This would be the structure we would operate under until we can successfully discuss and pass different legislation to amend that.
And when do you see the $5,000 fee going through?
The legislation itself would take effect in January 1. What I think we were looking at, and the staff and I had been looking at the whole table of current approved active schools, and it looks as though there's a fairly even, although somewhat even distribution across the quarters of how many programs are up for approval in a given month. Obviously, it ranges over 5-year periods of time, but the months in which they would become up for reapproval, it kind of breaks out into 4 fairly good ballparkish kind of jumps. But interestingly enough, and I think you probably would get this, is that they are very much clumped around the board's meeting cycle. So you see a lot of them in February and in July and in November. So it absolutely follows that pattern. So what we would have to do, and we've already started discussing this, is we would need to be working with, of course, OIS to work with Breeze, and then we would have to be working with DCA's cashiering to develop that system. And of course, we start right now, because the minute this bill becomes active, we need to be able to let programs know what it is that they're going to be expected to pay. Now, this, of course, creates, I think, significant problems, certainly for the public sector programs. I know that community colleges have like a 2-year budgeting cycle. And so even though I know that probably most of the programs have been kind of expecting this and planning for it, it's still going to come hard for a few people. One thing that I think is important for the board as a whole is to, I think, be quite vocal as we kind of move forward, and working with our colleagues, I think, at the Community College Chancellor's Office and the State Department of Ed and the county offices of education, at the very least, to see if we can't provide some way to, I think, assist. And obviously, it's not our job to do so, but to be supportive and to provide information is our job. So, like I said, there's a number of variables open right now that, obviously, again, it's going to take us the next few years to, I think, really unravel.
Thank you. That clarifies it.
So go ahead and tell your campus president.
Oh, he'll love that.
This is the moderator. I do see 2 people in the public. The first is Georgina K. And then after her is Kobe Pizzotti. I will unmute the microphone of Georgina K.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing me, or good afternoon. Um, I was unclear. The $5,000 filing fee and then no other fees. I disagree. I think there should be more to fund what the board does. I think it should be like a licensing or operations fee for the school itself on the end. So there absolutely should be a filing fee, but there should be, like you propose, an annual fee, whether it's based on the cohort size or not. There still needs to be that fee on the end. And I'm someone who's a small school, a small cohort, and we're in agreement with there needs to be this fee. You guys don't work for free. I don't work for free. And you deserve to be funded. And I don't know if that helps any or not. But my question was, is the $5,000 filing fee and then no other fees?
No. Miss Kay, I gotta tell you, I'm really, really liking you right now. I so appreciate your comments and if you weren't already planning to come to our public meeting and on the 12th, please do.
I will.
Wonderful. But no, the initial program approval fee at the end of the day is $20,000. So to file your application for consideration for work is $5,000. And so then
And then
you
it'll
start
be-
working with the NEC, and then when you are proposed for final approval to admit your first class,
Yes.
the program would pay another fee of 15, and so that takes you through that
20,000 total. Okay.
right. So that's the whole approval cycle fee, and as you know, that approval cycle is not just, it doesn't just end when the board says, okay, admit your first class.
Right.
You admit your first class, and then you look at your second class, and then you stop
Yes.
and wait for NCLEX
Yes.
results. And then, yeah, so I mean, this is something that we still need to work out, and that's how that gap works.
Yes.
You know, when the next phase of fees, take effect. So like I
Right.
said, we need to work on that.
Well, in preparation for all of these meetings, I have went to every state board of nursing, and I know the process for each state as well as their fees and what they do and what they do not do. The easiest state with no regulations is Florida. And they also have the least amount of fees. I really don't know how they do that. Um, and California is certainly not the most expensive, even if you go with the 20,000 for the whole program. I do think it needs to be on a case by case basis as far as the cohorts that are admitted. I also took the liberty to pull up each and every school in California and how many people that they have admitted during the year and how many are on the waiting list. And I know from calling the schools themselves, they're not reporting these waiting lists. They're steering them into either other programs or prerequisite courses. But there is indeed waiting lists for all of the LVN programs in this area anyway. It's terrible.
It is.
It really is.
I find this interesting because I think your research and our staff's research really tally, and we put together, I think, a really great spreadsheet that we hope to put on the web soon, as soon as we can, of course, make it ADA compliant, among other things. But yeah, we have I think a similar picture in mind here. So I really appreciate your thoughts here.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your clarification.
We'll talk to you on the 12th.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
We now have Mr. Pizzotti. I will unmute his microphone. Toby, you're free to speak.
Okay, there we go. All right, thank you very much. It's Kobe Pizzati again. Yeah, thank you for that that update, Elaine. That's great. One thing you did mention is about the new tight deadlines that are proposed in the amendments. What that does, since there is a now requirement in the bill, it's basically a mandate on the board, which would allow you to go to, you know, go back and do a BCP for additional staff. And I think that's something that is all part of this process. As you said, it's kind of fluid. This is, I think, more of a compromise approach for a Band-Aid period of time to see exactly how much money and how much revenue needs to be generated in order to try and address the backlog, as well as create a functioning, you know, balance in terms of reserves for the board to operate efficiently without, you know, completely relying on the licensees to subsidize the schooling programs. What I've been working with the committee staff on, and this was certainly not my preference. I certainly was backing the language that you had submitted to the committees, the BMP committees. But from our perspective, we feel that it's imperative that we get something in statute this year. As the sunset is only going to be for 1 year, it allows us
No,
to
it
look
isn't.
at, huh?
No, it isn't.
Oh, they're going to make it for an additional years?
Now, see, you stole my thunder, Kobe.
Oh, because I didn't
No.
see that in the amendments. I didn't see that in the amendments.
Right. The draft that was shared with us has us with a sunset date of 25, which means we would be producing our sunset report and being heard in 24, which means we're going to be needing to show some positive results in 23.
Okay. Well, regardless of that, you're still going to be generating considerably more in extra revenues than, say, zero.
Not.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that was, I think the point was still, I think is still in effect, that the idea of creating some additional revenues to see how that goes, and if that is not enough, we have the ability then in the next sunset, regardless of what time it is, but the very next sunset, to figure out what is the sweet spot. What is the amount that we need to do in order to eliminate the backlog, as well as make the make the board solvent on a continual basis, right? So I think that's where I'm coming from, and I would rather see something instead of nothing. The old adage, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," kind of plays out here. So I think that's where we're coming from, and we would hope that this revenue would eliminate the need to increase fees on licensees. That's going to be my constant chiming in.
As it should be. That's your job. No, that's absolutely, no, that's totally fair. But no, I think I feel fairly confident right now that the intent of the legislature, at least the staff and the committees, is to provide that kind of, well, we won't call it a life raft by any means, but really I think to figure out, as we kind of build gradually, so rather than, that initial big fee, change, for example, that we would build up. So even though it's not everything we had asked for, it is, I think, quite a significant step forward. I still have some things I would like to see this year, one of which would be the fee for provisional approval work, because that is so staff intensive. But, like I said, that's moving forward. And but no, I think you're correct, and I would agree completely that the idea here is to work over the next couple of years and find, as you say, that sweet spot of what that revenue figure should be and what that expense figure, what our operating budget should be, and balance it out and create a revenue stream that gets us there and provides a small but sensible reserve. So yeah, we will get there.
And additionally, I mean, once you get to, once you really make a dent into that, into the backlog, you're then going to have fewer and fewer schools taking up as much time on initial applications, right? If
That's our hope. Yes.
yeah. So like I said, I think finding that sweet spot in the next couple of years after the backlog is addressed is certainly going to be key. This is an issue that I've been working on for 10 years, and finally getting the budget committee or the BMP committees to give this the okay is a major victory. And I think we need to at the very least, be supportive of the amendments for right now, in order to get something on the books. If not, we could be in very dire straits, and have, I believe, a more critical look later on, which I would rather have the ability to avoid.
No, I would agree again with you then that the language being proposed right now is a good step forward for us, and we still have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely, totally agree, and I'll be there back in your play.
Appreciate it. Okay. So, Madam Chair, was there anything else that the committee was looking at in terms of the fee discussion?
No, I thought that was a very robust discussion. Mr. Durking, do you have anything else?
No questions. Thank you.
No, but the bottom line here is that we will have a bill in print very soon. That as soon as it's in print, I'll be sending to the whole board, and we'll certainly have, I think, some updates at the August 20 meeting. The bill is set to be heard initially on the 16th, which actually means it's going to be moved directly into suspense, and probably heard in suspense after our board meeting. But the time between now and when it's picked up out of suspense, the next 2-3 weeks, we do still have a little bit of time to discuss some other changes. There's actually more like operational, I think, wording changes really, but I think the concepts that are being offered to us are solid, and we'll be moving ahead. As I said, though, I do still hope to ask for the provisional fee.
That sounds good. All right, are we ready to move on to board member accountability?
Yes, I have to apologize here because I didn't ask the staff for an updated ballot log. It hasn't changed appreciably since the last one. Oh, never mind. They're smarter than I am. Great. So yeah, so as you see, this is through the July 8 packet, sent out July 8 and received, and I believe it's a 2 to 3 week processing period. So we'll see that the board's voting, and this is obviously a fluid thing, but to reference last month's discussion, we wanted to make certain that this information was really clear for the board members of how this information is tabulated and where it's reported, because and so we will be working on that, and we'll also be working, I think, on a little bit of a additional training, I think, on the process as a whole. But as I said, I think we can certainly provide some clarification for the full board on this information.
Excellent. Thank you for this. Are there any questions or comments?
There is. I'm going to unmute Ms. Turner.
I just wanted to add that I believe that I have some additional votes that still are not listed, but hopefully at some point we'll have a complete update. Thank you.
Let me try and clarify that. I think I think you're referring to the smaller interim packages that go out with like one or two petition files, and we don't tend to put those on the log. Generally speaking, we've only put on this log those main mailings that are like mostly twice a month. So I'm a bit I'm not quite certain of how we would go about going back and reforming this log to reflect all of those interims. Mr. Prouty, maybe you could comment on, the number that we'd be looking at over the past, 6-7 months of how many of those additional votes are sent to the board members.
Yes, it is, as you said, Elaine, this log reflects the regular board vote ballots that go out roughly every 10 days that include proposed decisions, stipulated settlements, and defaults. Interspersed with those votes are, from time to time, people will file petitions for reconsideration, mostly regarding the default situations. Those aren't tracked on the log because they don't go out on a regular basis and subject to people filing petitions for reconsideration. And I think we may get, in total, it probably doesn't even work out to one a month. Usually when a vote will go out, it'll only have one in a packet. Rarely it'll have two, but I want to say this year we've had probably 8 petitions for reconsideration sent out so far.
So my understanding here, if you will, those interim ballots that go out, they have time concerns, which is why they're not that you don't wait until the next bigger packet.
That's correct.
That's what I thought. Okay.
So just to clarify, this vote history includes mail ballots, the general mail ballots, but it does not include the mail ballots regarding petitions for reconsiderations that the board has been voting on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there any reason why you don't want to include it, since you're formulating an impression about whether a board member is voting or not? So why wouldn't you include votes on petitions for reconsideration mail ballots?
Well, we've never historically included them, and we did have some discussion with our legal counsel about starting to include them. I wouldn't say that we're attempting to formulate opinions as far as keeping track of these ballots. We're required to keep track of them, and it's just simply presenting information. We're not purposely trying to form or cause anyone to form opinions on board members. That's not the purpose of keeping track of votes.
It creates an impression, but all right. So I don't want to blow this up bigger than I think it is. I think I've responded to the issues I had last time, and so I'll leave it alone unless someone wants to continue addressing them.
Thank you.
Are we ready to move on to the filing documents?
Yes, thanks. Ah, yes, the filing documents. Right now, actually, we do have some documents outstanding for two of our appointees, and I didn't, of course, make an inventory of what, but at some point, I will, I think, need to follow up with you, Madam Chair, to ask for the third or fourth time a member to finish their packets. But right now, I think everybody else is current.
Okay.
And per diem, I have one packet to send to you for approval. And as far as training, I know that our mandatory trainings, I believe we are current. But in terms of our board specific training, the staff and I have been talking about what we would like to do in terms of the to really celebrate, if we're allowed to have an in-person meeting in November, to provide one day the way we had used to do that of a board training orientation and really I think educational programming. The one day we still won't be having petitioner hearings, but then so yeah, we would have one training day and one official board business date. I think it's interesting to note here that if like again, if we're able to meet in November, and I think that it's my understanding that I know the governor's office is really trying to fill our three vacant seats. It is possible, it is my great hope, that we'll have the new board members appointed for the November meeting. Now, should that be the case, I think we're going to be in an interesting position that most of the board, something like 2/3 of the board, will be appointed post-COVID. And ergo, we've never seen faces. We've never worked together personally. And I, of course, want to fix that, of course. So we've been thinking through a number of exercises that we can put together so that the board members can, get to know each other personally and share information and histories, share hints for how we do this work. So we have a lot to think through. I think that in the August meeting, what I would ask board members for any input of things they would particularly like to have a little bit of extra training on. I do think that it's important for us to do that fairly regular training with council and with the enforcement folks to really talk through the whole of that big process and the really important work that the board members do. So like I said, we'll be developing a program to take up that day. And it'll be fun, I promise.
Actually, all the trainings have been really interesting. So yeah, I've really liked them.
Great, thank you.
Are we to next meeting to be determined?
I believe we are.
Or do the September meeting?
It looks as though, man, meeting in a holiday weekend is the week of a holiday is bad. But if we were to meet Thursday the 9th, that is the day before the legislature concludes business for the year.
I can do the second. It's up to Mr. Durkin. Can you do the second?
I look to be okay for that day, the 9th.
The 2nd or the 9th? Which is better for you?
Either one would be fine. I would defer to staff.
Okay.
Me too. I can do the 2nd or the 9th. Either one is fine right now.
Okay. Well, we'll have I think we should pencil in the second then.
Okay.
And, great. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Are there any suggestions for future agenda items? Hearing none?
Guess not.
Yeah. I believe that this meeting will be adjourned at 2:06 p.m. Thank you very much for
Wonderful.
listening.
Thank you so much. Great meeting.
Take
All
care.
right.
you
Appreciate
guys.
everybody's attendance.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody.